Good evening. I'd like to call the meeting to order. And Sue, if you can please take attendance for us. Here.
Here. Alan Brown.
Here.
Michelle Bora. Here. Jim Hirschfield.
Here.
Greg Kava.
Here.
Lisa Roush. Here. Stephanie Coleman. Michael Sinatra. Jan Cody. Here. Julie Stewart. Here. Steve Tagley. Here.
Thank you. All right. Time for public comments on the agenda. Seeing no one, we'll move on to the consent agenda. There was a technical issue last week that precluded us from approving the notes from the September 11th meeting, so they remain on the consent agenda. Do we have any comments or questions on the consent agenda this evening? Hearing none, consent agenda is approved. Reports from the chair. Let me start off by saying a couple of things. This was supposed to be an education board meeting. We took it off the top of the agenda because tonight's agenda is a mix of education and business. So I wouldn't read into anything beyond just that simple statement. If the next cycle is pure business or pure education, we'll remain with the titles at the top. As I understand it, it is not a hard requirement that we have to have an education meeting or a business meeting in any frequency, but it was done that way to ensure that education at a certain frequency is covered and doesn't get eclipsed by business issues. But if we have to, as we talked at a previous meeting, if we have to commingle the agendas, we will, as we're doing this evening. So with that, let me get into my report. A couple of weeks back, we met, a number of the board members met with Pat and her and Teresa, and by extension a few other of her team, to review the annual goals for this year. I have to say, I think they're in pretty good shape. I think every time we sit and have a conversation around the goals, my impression is they're getting better, they're getting tighter with each pass. So I believe, Pat, you're going to wrap them up this week. The few actions, and then so we'll have those to talk about at the next opportunity. But they're I think for the most part done, I would say. So that's good. At that meeting, we did start to talk about a few of the goals as it relates to curriculum and education, and which then prompted a discussion about the education committee. And do we really have, do we have an education committee per se? Do we need one? How does that work? The group that was at this discussion about the goals concluded and made a recommendation that we form an education committee, like all the other committees that we have, that has a chair, that meets regularly with noticed meetings, so they can tackle some of the issues that are starting to surface regarding curriculum. And one of them was, for example, progression in certain course loads as it relates to the state and how the state is measuring us, and getting some input and feedback on things that are curriculum related. So the committee was, so I reached out to Michael Sinatra, who is the chairman of education. We talked through the changes. Michael was on board. He may have reached out to a number of people regarding his first monthly or semi-monthly meeting. But Michael was ill over the weekend, and he reached out to me and asked me to cancel the meeting, which may or may not have even been formally noticed. But I know it caused some confusion. But I was doing Michael a favor He's back home now, resting, but again, he had an incident which caused him to ask me to cancel the board meeting, the committee meeting. So what we're doing with the committee meeting, again, is to get it more focused on a regular basis. And yes, we will continue to have education meetings, board meetings focused on education. That won't stop, but we'll have a little bit more tactical focus on some of the educational challenges or issues that are coming up. Julie, I believe, is now part of the Education Committee, as well as Lisa. Is that my understanding?
Well, I was contingent on switching me out of the other committee I'm on, but I don't know if that's been worked out yet.
Mm-hmm.
I guess my answer is yes, sort of.
We'll work through that. But is there any questions? Michelle?
I guess if we could just. If we could just make sure that Michael understands that those, I would like to see those noticed, because I would like to attend if I'm available. So,
Yeah.
since it's a regular meeting now. And
I don't think so.
I will do my best to attend all of them, because it's a subject that's really important to me, but
They will be
I'm on
noticed.
a lot of committees.
Yeah, they will be noticed. Jim?
I know that you said that you would, but I think that committees as a whole for the Education Committee are important for the board. There's a lot of information presented. We're the only ones really who are examining what's going on, and there's a lot of things, so I think
Right.
that should continue, as you said it would.
As it would. Right, I agree. Any other questions? So I was going to ask Michael to say a few words tonight, so we'll postpone that when he's feeling better.
Okay.
So the third item on my list was the retreat. It's next week. An agenda was sent out to all of you later this afternoon. If, again, any comments, any suggestions, please get them to me. But location there is also in the agenda. It'll be off-site. It won't be here at Chicago. It'll be at a local establishment. So unless there's a question on the retreat, I'll ask Pat.
Okay,
Your report. Thank you.
Couple of things. We'll start with appointments. We have Stephanie Turney, who is going to be part-time library clerk at Burnham, and also Brittany Turney. They've divided the position in half. Sisters, family members. Sisters? Sisters, yeah. We are very sad. We're losing Christine Hardy as the secretary at Chapag. She's going back to Avita Hair Salon, and very sad. She's going to be a manager, and so we're happy for her, very sad for us. Noreen Shea, another staff member who's leaving January 1st. She is a reading specialist here at Chapag. Field trip, we do need a motion, please, Mr. Chair, for the Model UN in Boston
So
on January 25th to 28th.
Second? Oh, there is a second? Sorry. Thank you, Greg. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those against? All those who abstain? Motion passes.
Great, thank you. As far as field trips go, Mrs. DeBrito was going to bring this up at tonight's meeting, but because it was canceled, I do want to bring it up. We do have two staff members, Mr. Nolan and Mrs. Adele, who want to take international trips this upcoming school year. Mike wants to go to Peru, April vacation, and Heidi wants to take a small group to France, some point January, February, March. They have not really started to pursue the trips because it is a lot of work, and they really need to hear from the board and their feelings about international trips.
And they need to make a presentation to the board. If they expect the board to, may I?
Please, Jim.
They expect the board to approve a foreign trip, they need to make a presentation.
Well, I guess what we're asking, before they put all of that work in, is the board willing to think about letting them go. I think that's what they want to know. And then they'll be happy to come and make presentations.
Yeah, it seems to me the last time a trip got derailed, it was to France, and it had to do with concerns, security concerns.
Correct.
I think if that's going to be a concern this time, I don't think anyone on the board would want to say that we shouldn't have children visiting other countries. I think that's a wonderful thing. And a trip, and as a person who's visited France several times himself, I think it's a wonderful place to go. But if security concerns are going to trump it, we need to get that on the table first and foremost. If that may ought to come to us, we ought to look at that issue first. Because at the time they were talking about going, it was after several incidents over there of international terrorism, and there were some concerns. I don't know if those concerns are still the case now. So we need to look at that.
Michelle?
I was going to say the similar thing. I think by them giving us the names of the country, we should do our security checks and see if we're even open to travel to those countries before they go and put together an itinerary, because that wasn't really our main issue. And I think, if I remember correctly about the France trip, part of the recommendation that came to us from the security professional was that the problem, some of the major sites and with a large group, it's just is a target. So if we gave that guidance back and said, if it's a group under X, whatever that is, 12, and if you're not maybe going to a couple of the major, if those are still concerns, I don't know. But I think some guidelines back to them before they put in the hours of work putting together an itinerary, that would be good.
Peru. I can tell you the France group is going to be small. That did come to me. But it's a lot of work for the teachers to organize, and there's a lot of fundraising, et cetera, and they have no problem making a presentation, but I think they want to know that you have open minds before they spend all of that time and energy.
Jim?
I think the question to get the sense of the board is there anyone on the board who would vote no on foreign travel under any circumstances? So that means the board's open to listening.
Okay.
Possible, I guess.
Okay, great. Well, we'll have them come to a future meeting very soon.
Yeah, what I would suggest is, where Michelle was going, is that a prerequisite is perhaps doing a little research on the security aspect. And if there are no red flags that come back from searches of the State Department, et cetera, then I think you can proceed as you described. But if something should jump up, they should discuss it with you first and then to the board.
We do have someone who helps us with security, so we'll have Ms. Gallo check on that, and if we get it all clear, I'll tell them to move forward.
Jim?
Okay?
To move forward with the presentation.
Presentation, yes. No.
I wouldn't, what I was going to say, I wouldn't give them too much encouragement. I think that because the board's it's granted, it would be a very serious decision for the board to let them go, in my estimation.
No, that's why I'm bringing it up. So, okay, you have the October enrollment. The reason, it has changed, I guess it's coming right now, sorry. It has changed a little bit. We've gone down, I believe 2 kids have discharged from Burnham and 1 possibly from WPS. But this is the important sheet because it's the October 1st enrollment. And October 1st are the numbers that are relayed to the state, and that's how everything is decided with budgetary and who's part of your school for assessments, et cetera, et cetera. So October 1st is always a very important date in education. So I wanted you to have that. I want to thank everyone who made homecoming such a great success. Thursday and Saturday were wonderful. Our students did a great job supporting our athletes, our coaches, our parents, our fans. It was wonderful. And I know Mr. Parachi and Mr. Conway really led the way. And it was just a wonderful opportunity to celebrate Chapag. I also had the opportunity, thanks to the board, to go on a conference last week, Dolly Conference, October 4th, 5th, and 6th Board members were given it has a little logo, a summary of my conference, and also a magazine. I actually am one of the few people who runs around and takes things and carries them home. Nobody else does that. But anyway, DOLLI is a District Administrator Leadership Institute. And I was invited, you have to be invited to participate, and I was invited by Randy Collins, who many of you remember did the superintendent search for Region 12. And they meet 6 times throughout the year, and you're invited to one of the conferences. And it is a superintendent summit, and it is invited guests, and there are sponsors who share with you cutting-edge technology solutions on what's going on in schools and how you can come back and impact student achievement for your kids. It has a couple of different setups. One of the setups are deep dives into conversations, and you sit with a group of superintendents for about an hour and a half. One was on college and career readiness. The other was on special education students and improving achievement. I got some good tips. I also was able to validate a lot of the things that we do, which is successful, so you can do and hear all of those things. The superintendents come from all over the country, all different sizes of school systems, so it's very interesting how we all interact with staff, how we all do different things to impact student achievement. The conference has many sponsors. That's another part, and what happens is you get to hear for a half hour at a time from different sponsors who have different solutions about what's going on in education. There were many, but there's one on data. There was a great one on strategic planning, which I got some good ideas, and there was some good information about that. School safety, which I went to, which I thought was also very interesting. And that is a program that Newtown, Connecticut, happens to use. And I guess the one I was most impressed by was why cutting-edge career and tech education programs use mixed reality technology. It was a very impressive session. There's a new virtual mixed reality technology called Z-Space. It is, you have a computer station, probably about this big. You wear virtual glasses. You're able to go into different curriculum areas, and with a pen, I don't have all the computer terms, you're able to dissect, you're able to find out information, how clocks works, you're able to do things with the arts. They have an automotive curriculum, they have a welding curriculum, and it was really very, very cool. It was very engaging, it was very high interest. I think that it would be a great program to introduce to Chapag and Region 12. I've asked Teresa and Karen to invite them here. They have a bus that they can bring up, and we could all go in and see it and learn about the curriculum. And I just thought it was really something that would enhance that STEM piece of the agri-science for us. And we could start small in the makerspace or some area and then move it bigger into the different curriculum areas. It was really, really exciting. And I think the kids will love it. And so that's why I like going to these conferences, because you always can bring back something that's innovative. And because we're so small and we're in such a isolated area of the state, unless you go looking for that, you really aren't exposed to it. So that was my conference. I hope this was a good enough report. I'm happy to give more information. And there's 2 different magazines. This is the Tech Excellence that has recognizing STEM excellence. And then there's another one, if somebody can just hold it up. That was the District Administrator Leadership. And that we get once a month. And we get 10 copies of that to different administrators. There's a whole bunch, 10 of us who get it. And there's really great stuff in there. And so, I think it's a very worthwhile conference, not your regular run-of-the-mill kind of conference. And so that's my report. And that is my report, totally.
Any questions for Dr. Pat on the conference?
That was good, thanks.
A lot of good stuff on makerspace.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Really good.
No, did you share this with the teachers?
Oh, I always do. Oh, I always do, yeah.
I mean, it's awesome.
Yeah, I'd like to, I think that's, is it disease space?
Disease space, yeah.
Sounds,
Yeah, Teresa's working
Very
on getting
intriguing.
them here, yeah.
right. And part of our digital transformation
Absolutely.
that Karen and I were just talking about before the board meeting got started. But this is good. Thank you, Pat.
You're welcome.
Appreciate that. Okay, moving to the next item on our agenda is new topics and updates. And first up, we have Teresa DeBrito. Teresa, the floor is yours.
Good evening, everyone. There is a packet that is being passed out to you.
Thank you.
So I've been preparing this presentation for you, the sharing of our standardized test results. And I'd like to go through the packet page by page with you. And I'd like to address questions and have a dialogue at the end after going through the packet. So we turn the packet. I have included a table of contents because there's a lot of information included here. And so I do want to spend a little time introducing the information that's in this document. So this evening, you have received all of the district standardized test results, and that includes grades 3 through 8, Smarter Balanced, which assesses English language arts and literacy and mathematics, as well as the science results for grade 5 and grade 8 for CMT. Also includes the CAP results for grade 10 and the SAT results for grade 11. Also included are comparisons, where we rank in the state and how we rank compared to other districts in our demographic reference group. So on page 3, under the background section, there's a table there that provides specificity as to what is assessed on the Smarter Balanced English Language Arts portion. In reading, students have to be able to read closely and analyze text and demonstrate comprehension. In the writing, they do have to produce effective and well-grounded writing that obviously addresses a specific purpose based on what's asked of the student. They also are rated on effective listening. There is audio that they listen to. They have to take notes on what they hear, and then they have to respond to comprehension questions based on the audio. And research as well, which is aligned to that portion of the assessment. On page 4, in regard to mathematics, there are 4 areas, very general for math. It indicates concepts and procedures. And really, this is a student's ability to explain and to interpret and to carry out mathematical procedures with fluency and accuracy. Problem solving is also assessed, that students are able to solve complex, well-posed problems, and that they can use strategies to address those problems and respond coherently. Modeling and data analysis and communicating reasoning are grouped together in the results for students. And again here, the student has to demonstrate a competence in analyzing the problems and that they can create a viable articulation of the mathematics involved. In the middle of page 4, I included for you the SAT measures for evidence-based reading and writing and mathematics. And I'd like to bring something important to your attention. Level 1, the score range is 200 to 410 for both the evidence-based reading and writing and the mathematics. That shifts significantly for math after level 1. For level 2, you can see evidence-based reading and writing. The range is from 420 to 470. But for mathematics, if you get up to 520, you are still considered in level 2. Level 3, another significant shift. Evidence-based reading and writing, the range is from 480 to 620. And level 3, so that you know, that's the level that the expectation is that you have met competence in that particular discipline. But for mathematics, you need to have a starting score of 530 up to 640 is the range for meeting that expected performance. And then you see level 4, the window is a little closer, 630 to 800 for evidence-based reading and writing, and 650 to 800 for the mathematics. So under there, that little chart I do describe, level 1 indicates that the student has not met the achievement level. Level 2, they are approaching the achievement level. And level 3, they have met the achievement level, and 4, exceeding the achievement level. And so for the SAT, these results, the 4 levels, and those designated words are similar to the Smarter Balanced. Under that, I referenced the CMT and the CAPT, which has been in existence for quite a few years, over a decade. And the particular assessment that students took this prior school year has been the same for many, many years. And so I do make a notation on page 5 that the CMT and CAPT has been phased out, and the state has requested permission to use this year as an opportunity to pilot the Next Generation Science Assessment, which is aligned to the Next Generation Science Standards that the state did adopt 2 years ago. And the CMT and CAPT are rated differently. There are 5 levels, and typically we're looking at level 4 for goal and level 5 for exceeding goal. In the middle of page 5, the district reference group information, because you will see the references for all of the different grade levels and disciplines in this document, I thought it important for you to understand how we are grouped with other towns. And basically, we are really grouped based on similar income, education, occupation, family structure. They do take into account poverty and home language. So all of those demographic criteria were a part of determining the demographic groups. DERG A, that's short, DERG for Demographic Reference Group, is the wealthiest communities. They all grouped are together. And it goes to DERG I, where the poorest communities are grouped together. Region 12 is in DERG C. And at the bottom of page 5, I included additional information so that you are aware that during the school year, there are lots of processes in place where educators are assisting students to help prepare them for these types of assessments, because they can be quite high stress for students. And we do administer the PSAT to all 10th and 11th graders. In addition, we do administer the Smarter Balanced interim online assessments that we have access to. And we certainly do look and monitor progress for students based on those particular results. In addition to that, it's important to note that our populations are small, and that we can see significant changes in percentages based on the smallness of our particular grades and schools. And page 6, basically the important statement there is that these results are based on one data point at a given day and time that the student took the assessment. So we would expect that if they were to take it on a different day, that they're going to do similarly to how they performed on this particular assessment date. The schools do keep very accurate records. Sometimes a student might not do quite as well as a parent or an educator would expect. And I do know of cases where a parent, has questioned that, and the administrator is able to go back to attendance records and say, oh, you know what? Do you remember your child was out the day before, wasn't really feeling well, but came to school to take the assessment and then left early because they still weren't feeling well. So things like that, we definitely do take into account. So it's important to recognize that. So on page 7,
That's crazy.
you will see the overall district results, grades 3 through 8. This is specific to Smarter Balance that is assessed in all of those grades. From the most recent 3 years, since the inception of Smarter Balance, and we are on a continuous upward movement of performance there, so we're happy about that overall. In the middle of the page, each grade for the district, you see the 2017 results for English Language Arts Literacy and Mathematics, and that's for the district. In addition, the CMT and CAP science results are just below that, as well as the SAT results. On page 8, here we have the overall 3-year results for English Language Arts from grades 3 through 8, and by the schools as well in the middle of the page. And then at the bottom of the page, math. Oh, your packet's updated, page 7. I have the original. So I'm grabbing, see, mine has all the notes and everything, all the edits. And so, okay, so now I'll be on your page 7. That was my page 8, so sorry about that. Okay, page 8, that same information continues for math. And then in the middle of the page, longitudinal results for CMT and CAP science. Again, the percent of students at or above goal. The color coding, you probably have already recognized that that is a way to identify a cohort group. So students that were in 3rd grade are a particular color, and when you look at 4th grade the following year, it's the same color, and then the 3rd year, again, the same color, so you can look at actual cohorts of students in addition to each individual year. On page 9, we have the individual school results. The previous pages, we did have a combination of whole district results by grade. Here we have each individual school and the grades that are assessed in that particular school, as well as each subject area. And these are the results for 2017, the most recent results. Please, if you don't mind. So on page 10, this is where the comparison of how we did compared to other towns in our DIRG, as well as the ranking at the state level, begins. And it's important to note that the state does shield some results if the count is below 5. So when we look at each different level, for small schools, it's not always accessible to the public. So if it was accessible, it's accounted for here. And so you can see overall, for English Language Arts Literacy, grades 3 through 8 as a district, where we rank. We rank at the top of our DIRG. We're 3rd in the DIRG. Overall performance in the state, we are ranked 17th in the state, and I do take a look at how we perform compared to communities that are in wealthier DRGs A and B. And so at the bottom of page 10, I have listed that Region 12 students for overall performance in English language arts and literacy, grades 3 through 8, outperformed Glastonbury, Cheshire, Woodbridge, Region 15, Greenwich, South Windsor, Fairfield, Orange, Granby, New Fairfield, West Hartford, Newtown, Madison, and Brookfield, all from DRG B, as well as Reading, Wilton, Weston from DRG A. On page 11, here the comparison is by specific grade. So grade 3, you can see our students are at the top of the DRG, placing second. And we ranked 4th in the state, outperforming Monroe, Glastonbury, Avon, Simsbury, Greenwich, Cheshire, New Fairfield, Newtown, South Windsor, Trumbull, Farmington, Woodbridge, West Hartford, Region 15, Brookfield, Granby, Orange, Guilford, Madison, and Fairfield from DRG B, and Easton, Darien, Reading, Wilton, and Weston from DRG A. Page 12. Page 12 has the 4th grade results for English language arts literacy. And again, we're ranking at the top, second for our DRG. For the entire state, we ranked 10th, outperforming South Windsor, Madison, Simsbury, Cheshire, Guilford, Avon, Glastonbury, Region 15, Greenwich, Fairfield, West Hartford, New Fairfield, Woodbridge, Newtown, Granby, Orange, Brookfield, all from DRG B, and Wilton and Weston from DRG A. Page 13, these are the results for 5th grade. Again, at the top of our DRG, placing second. In the state, we ranked 12th, outperforming Farmington, Cheshire, Simsbury, Guilford, Orange, Region 15, Granby, Greenwich, Glastonbury, Newtown, Fairfield, Madison, New Fairfield, South Windsor, Brookfield, West Hartford, and Woodbridge from DRG B, and Wilton, Weston, and Reading, all from DRG A. On page 14, grade 6, English language arts literacy. Here we're at the bottom of our DRG, and we ranked 88th in the state. Page 15. Grade 7. Placed first in our DRG. Not only did grade 7 perform so well in our DRG, but it's first in the state of Connecticut, outperforming Guilford, Trumbull, Simsbury, Granby, Avon, Fairfield, Region 5, South Windsor, Glastonbury, Region 15, New Fairfield, Greenwich, Monroe, West Hartford, Farmington, Cheshire, Newtown, Madison, and Brookfield, all from DRG B, and all the towns in DRG A. You have all the towns listed there because we were number 1 in the state. And if you're wondering how the towns are listed, because it's not in alphabetical order, they're listed by who was closest to our percentage. So Guilford was pretty close to how we did in 7th grade, and Brookfield in DRG B was farthest away from us. That's why it's listed in that fashion. Grade 8, English language arts literacy, more towards the middle of our DRG, ranked 58th in the state, outperforming Madison. Then the next section, beginning on page 17, is the same results, but for mathematics. So overall, grades 3 through 8 in the district, we're at the top of our DIRG, placing third. Overall, we ranked 21st in the state, outperforming South Windsor, Orange, Simsbury, Monroe, Region 15, Newtown, Fairfield, Cheshire, New Fairfield, Madison, Granby, Brookfield, and West Hartford from DIRG B, and Richfield and Wilton from DIRG A. On page 18, we begin to look at the comparisons by specific grade. So grade 3, mathematics, performed at the top of our DIRG, placing second. We are ranked third in the state, outperforming Trumbull, New Fairfield, Region 15, Greenwich, Guilford, Monroe, Glastonbury, Cheshire, South Windsor, Woodbridge, Avon, Farmington, Madison, Simsbury, Newtown, Fairfield, West Hartford, Brookfield, Granby, and Orange from DIRG B. And New Canaan, Reading, Darien, Weston, Ridgefield, Easton, Westport, and Wilton from DIRG A. Page 19. These are the results for grade 4. And again, at the top of our DIRG, placing second. We ranked 5th in the state, outperforming Trumbull, Guilford, Farmington, Madison, Monroe, South Windsor, Woodbridge, Glastonbury, Region 15, Greenwich, Simsbury, Avon, New Fairfield, Orange, Cheshire, Fairfield, Newtown, West Hartford, Brookfield, and Granby from DIRG B, and Westport, Darien, Ridgefield, Wilton, and Weston from DIRG A. On page 20, these are the 5th grade results. Again, placing at the top of our DIRG in second. We ranked 12th in the state, outperforming Farmington, Fairfield, Avon, Monroe, Simsbury, Region 15, Greenwich, Cheshire, South Windsor, Madison, Newtown, New Fairfield, Granby, West Hartford, Woodbridge, and Brookfield from DIRG B, and Ridgefield, Reading, and Weston from DIRG A. We needed a laugh right then and there, right? Perfect timing. Okay, page 21. Grade 6 results were more in the middle, and we ranked 64th in the state, outperforming Madison. Page 22. Grade 7 results were in the middle towards the top in our DIRG, and we ranked 25th in the state, outperforming Granby, Farmington, Brookfield, South Windsor, Simsbury, Madison, West Hartford, New Fairfield, Region 15, Cheshire, and Monroe from DIRG B. Page 23. Grade 8 mathematics results, again towards the top of our DIRG. We ranked 35th in the state, outperforming Granby, Simsbury, Cheshire, West Hartford, New Fairfield, and Madison in DIRG B. Page 24. Grade 5 science results, placing first in our DIRG, and we ranked 6th in the state, outperforming Granby, Woodbridge, Trumbull, Avon, Glastonbury, New Fairfield, Orange, Simsbury, South Windsor, Cheshire, Fairfield, Greenwich, Guilford, Newtown, Brookfield, Region 15, West Hartford, and Madison from DIRG B, and Weston, Darien, Ridgefield, Easton, and Westport from DIRG A. Page 25. Here we have the grade 8 science results, placing more in the middle of our DIRG. We ranked 59th in the state and outperformed New Fairfield, Brookfield, West Hartford, and South Windsor, all from DIRG B. Page 26. Grade 10 CAP science results, we're placing closer to the bottom of our DIRG, and we ranked 70th in the state. Page 27. Here we're looking at the SAT, grade 11, evidence-based reading and writing results. We placed in the middle of our DIRG, ranked 34th in the state, outperforming Cheshire, Monroe, Brookfield, West Hartford, and South Windsor, all from DIRG B. Page 28, grade 11 SAT mathematics. We're in the middle towards the lower part of our DIRG, and we ranked 45th in the state, outperforming New Fairfield. On page 29, in one chart, I included the subject and the grade and all of the districts in DIRGs A and B that Region 12 students had done better on their particular assessment. And so this is a complete packet that you just received. I do want to let you know that as soon as the results came out, administrators were all excited to see what the results were like. And there were some areas that we were elated. Like, this is mind-boggling. This is just fantastic. And then there were other areas that made educators ill because teachers felt the kids had a successful year. And how can there be such a disconnect with their performance? So we immediately pulled teachers together by discipline, teachers that did have success, teachers whose students did not have as much success, and started to strategize immediately. And they have spent weeks of time together with administrators to really look at student needs, to analyze the reports that we've gotten, to look at what was done last year. Were there indicators during the year that somehow were missed, that were red flags, to prevent this sort of thing from happening again and to ensure that students are feeling comfortable. We have found that adolescents in particular, many don't necessarily take the assessment seriously. We're trying to address that. In addition, grade 10 in particular, this year's juniors, Mrs. Gallo did meet with students to find out what happened with science. And they were at a loss. Students that the teacher expected to excel, that had excelled in previous years on the CMT, it made no sense. We've never seen anything like it. The state has not come out yet with their reporting on this, but they have said to us that there was a significant drop at the high school level. We also know that we have been trying to juggle both, transitioning to next-gen science standards and preparing for that assessment that's coming, and still trying to maintain the requirements of CAPT, which is difficult when the new standards were implemented by the state of Connecticut 2 years ago, and that's what the state is recognizing, that perhaps the shift was already beginning to happen and the assessment was delayed in implementation, at least the new one, and perhaps that is a cause. But we definitely are looking into every possible aspect and analyzing what could have possibly been wrong, and trying to make adjustments, instructional adjustments, curricular adjustments, getting feedback from students, working with teachers. A lot of collaboration has been occurring. So I wanted you to be aware of that because, as you know, the teachers work very hard. The students work hard too, and we just need to find out where the disconnect is and ensure that students are taking the assessment seriously. We do have pockets of students in particular grades refusing to take the assessment. And we didn't really encounter that before. And so that was, a recent issue, maybe a politicized issue in the past few years with the implementation of Smarter Balance and all the new assessments. So we are trying to address that as well. Yes. Yes, you have a policy that indicates that the students are required to take the state mandated assessments. Well, but the policy doesn't have repercussions. It just says you will.
I'm sorry, but you've chosen not to bring it to the attention of the board till now, that people are refusing to take the test.
Oh, no, there were board members that were aware, especially in the subcommittee, the
Okay.
Little Education Committee. Yes,
All right.
yes, yes.
Do you have any recommendation for the board?
Well, we would hope that the efforts that administrators and teachers are putting forth are going to curtail that from continuing. But we are a bit concerned because do we institute discipline if a student doesn't comply with a particular policy to take the assessment? If the parent is making the request and actually directing the student not to take the assessment, we don't stand over them and force them to respond. But that is a predicament that we are in with a handful of families.
Yeah, I don't know how the chair wants to handle this. Is this something that should be referred to the committee, or do you want to have a conversation about this right now?
I have a question first. Does the state actually factor in these percentages when a student doesn't take the test as a
Yes,
zero?
we are required, yes. We are required by law that 95% of our students participate, because by school, if we go below that, we will not have school distinction honor. We will be stripped of it immediately. So there are consequences for not adhering to federal and state law.
So again, just to be clear, if they
Yes,
do
it
not
counts
take the
against them.
tests, it's going to dilute
Counts
the
against us.
percentage,
Level 1.
our performance.
Yes, it reduces our percentage, yes. And we're talking mostly about high-achieving students. We're not talking about low-achieving students.
Greg?
Do we explain to the students and their parents the negative implication this could have for the school and hence the value of their diploma? And do we have reasons why they don't want to take this assessment?
I think it's from the recent political climate, which is calmer now. But if you recall, with Common Core and the Smarter Balance, there were communities, large groups of families refusing to have their child take the assessment. And so there was concern, Big Brother having access to student records. This was a definite change in what we were experiencing before we had online assessments.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I would like to hear from the board, or thoughts about this, at least initial thoughts, so we can give the administration some guidance here, or perhaps if it's worthy, bring it back to committee and recommendations back to the board. But I'll open up the floor. Jim?
Well, I would assume that either through the request to the board or bringing it to the board's attention or through committee, if you've spoken to someone, that if you need the board's help, you have to add, if you want the board to do something discipline-wise, we need to know that, what you want.
Okay, now we do, I guess, but it all depends, I suppose, on how I know there's an awful lot that has to do with privacy. So on the one hand, however the board intervenes has to be on a general level of enforcement as opposed to on a specific level, which would probably open up new realms of privacy violation. Which leads me to think of, as far as enforcement, you said you really can't force someone to take a test. And if you can force them to take a test, you can't actually force them to excel at the test if they're taking it under duress. But, you know, this could be a whole can of worms, but it appears from what you're saying that it's not necessarily the students who, at base, are encouraged to do their best, and except for, you know, some circumstances where they get sidetracked or distracted or otherwise handicapped, they really do. This is kind of offset by their parents and the politicization of it. So
That's correct.
maybe what we need to do is put our heads together is to see how we can, not that this is our job, but maybe it is our, you know, emergency task to figure out how we can, as a school system, help the administration educate these parents. Because clearly we're at a kind of a loggerheads in our society now, where people don't want to learn things other than what they already assume they understand. And if these parents are assuming they understand something that is detrimental to their child, it might be very difficult to change their minds. But maybe that's the task that we need to talk about here, as to how we can help, not in terms of enforcement, but in terms of education, help these parents not hamper their children's success in the way that they may not be intending, but which is obviously a byproduct of whatever their politics are. Is there something we can do to...
Julie?
Teresa, do we know if this is comparing apples to apples? In other words, we can't be the only district that is experiencing this. So if this is sort of at the same level throughout the state, wouldn't it then be that our results are sort of fair? Or are we saying that in Region 12, there's this group and we don't have these types of parents in any other regions? Or don't we know?
So initially, with the transition, it was mild in Region 12 compared to what was happening in other districts. But there's still this like overflow. I think other districts have overcome that. But here we do still have pockets of families refusing.
So we have to find out how other districts overcame.
Jen?
So can you give us an idea of when you say handful? Can you give us a number?
Yeah, at least half a dozen. 8? Okay. At least half a dozen. Right. Probably close to 10, whole district.
Michelle?
I just wanted to point out to Julie that because we're such a small district, every child represents quite a few percentage points. So having, even though the number, you know, it may not be unique to Region 12. It might be experienced, you know, there might be a handful in every district, but, you know, in a class of 10, each child's 10%, you know, it makes a big difference to
Makes a big difference.
10 to 12, depending on, you know, where they sit in, you know,
Right.
which class and how large that class is, but it can make a big difference.
Alan?
I don't know about that. Usually, as far as statistics go, they amplify regardless. So if you have 10 kids here, you would assume in a school district's 3 times the size of ours, you might have 30 kids there. I think we were better off looking in terms of if these other school systems have overcome it, we can look into how they managed to overcome it. I think is a better way, because there are certain things here, you know, we're not talking, you know, one of the issues I think we're all so familiar with now, and if we're not, it's can remind you of it, but at least it's nothing that we have to deal with. It seems we're all familiar with the sawtoothing that goes on in a small district. And that's something that I think is particular, that a greater volume of a student population doesn't necessarily amplify. Sawtoothing is very specific to the fact that you have a tiny population, but I don't think we can look to this kind of issue the same way. There's no reason to expect why you'd have a certain percentage that's different from us than percentage that's different from other schools. So sawtoothing aside, and you know, particular other random events, I don't think we can look into, you know, the adolescence factors or people not taking it seriously factors, because that's going to be endemic to any school system. and we just seem to drop for some reason in these other places. And we can't really complain about changing standards either, and alignment between standards, because that's something that all school systems have to deal with. But, not to treat that simply as, taking away excuses. I want to treat that in terms of if other school systems have managed to recover, especially in this instance you're talking about, this defiance, then we can actually look to that to see how they managed to do that. And I know that you're all very well networked and very well connected, each in your own way, and then sometimes collectively to other school systems. That maybe would be before us band of know-it-alls weighs in at all to help, maybe just having you turn to other school systems to find out where they succeeded and where we still have a little more work to do to overcome this kind of political.
We can certainly reach out. I mean, there is a district, small district close to us, that it was so significant that the commissioner and deputy commissioner went to hold a meeting with families, and it did not go well at all.
But there's
And those results are not public.
Right.
So when the results are so tiny, you don't have that many kids in the categories. They're not even public.
Right. But as I said, maybe we can find out where it did go well, where there was a little bit of turnaround,
Right.
and find out what happened there.
Right.
Greg?
Yeah, I have a couple questions. The first is, I would like to know, not necessarily tonight, but I would like to have more details, try to understand why people are resistant to this. I mean, if you're telling me these are high-performing kids, technically they may have high-performing parents. I'd like to know what they know that we don't and the State Department of Education doesn't know. Second question, I guess, is it would seem to me that, I mean, there are a lot of things in education that we want someone to do something, and if they don't, we act punitive. And before we engage in trying to figure out whether there should be some punitive measure for not participating in this, like maybe being stripped of all honors or some other horrible thing, the question is what role does this test play? How does it impact the delivery of education to the student who either takes it or doesn't take it? And how does it impact the delivery of education to the other students in the school? So I'm looking up on the wall there, and I'm seeing answer a call to citizenship, participation and collaboration and respect, and I'm wondering if it implicates that in some bad way. On the other hand, people that engage in taking a position on a principled basis, we need to make room for that too, as a aspect of respect at that. And maybe they know something we don't. So I would like to know more.
Absolutely.
I would like to know more on what are the reasons for no, and how a yes or no impacts the student's education and the education of the other students in the district. Because I think those are the critical factors. I don't want to just say, let's be punitive because they're not following the rules. Sometimes there's a reason not to follow the rules, and it may tell us more. And I don't want to be being punitive just to satisfy a state desire to have information. And if there are privacy issues or other concerns, or if there's a reason they don't want to take it because they don't want to participate because it puts them at a disadvantage, I think we need to know that, because the state needs to know that, and the state needs to figure that out, that piece out. And maybe we shouldn't let any of our children take the test if, for example, the problems are severe enough. So I think we need to know more about those
Certainly.
aspects.
I have that. I can get that to you.
Lisa?
Hi, Teresa. My question was, is this a specific grade? I know you were saying that you were shocked with the scores in the 10th grade science, but are we talking about
No, 10th grade science, remember I said that Mrs. Gallo actually met with students. Like the teacher was like, how could this student, this
Right.
student, this student, this student not be at goal?
Okay.
That made no sense whatsoever. So it's not grade 10.
Okay.
It's in the middle
Well,
level.
My question is, because the grade that I'm concerned with after looking at the report is grade 6.
Right.
Because the scores were very low in both the math and the science. So I didn't know if that was the concentration where the kids were. Because if not, and the kids took these tests, then I think that's a major concern for that
course.
class.
Of course, we are all on the
I'm sure
same
you
page
were,
there.
right.
That's why we're.
But I didn't know if that was where the concentration of kids were that didn't take the test.
A few in 6th grade, I can tell you that for
Okay.
sure.
Okay. So that's maybe one of the reasons why
That could be a contributing factor,
Yeah.
but we have opened up all, like, we're not holding back looking and analyzing at everything.
Okay. Okay, thank
We're
you.
much more, like, we're really hands-on.
I'm
The
sure you
administrators are
are.
really hands-on with this because we do want students to demonstrate what they know how to do.
Right.
So,
Right. But on the positive, some other grades did fantastic, so it's not
we don't want to overshoot.
all, so we want to congratulate them, but I was just concerned about grade 6, so thank you.
You're right. I mean, and we were excited about that, but
Yeah.
the excitement really
Yeah.
is very limited once you see where, there are specific needs that we need to look into. Yeah, it does overshadow that. Yeah.
Right.
But you're right. We should recognize and celebrate all of the positives.
Right.
Thank you.
So Teresa, you said, and you just repeated it, that there's more work to be done here, right?
Oh, yes.
This is presenting a challenge on a number of
Yes.
fronts. The answer is not obvious.
Right.
I think the board would like to believe that all of the problems are, let's say, perhaps in these families who don't want to participate, because then we know where we need to
But it's
focus.
not.
But it's not. So the question to you is, without trying to certainly solve it here, and certainly not by the board, when do you think and the team think they'll be ready to come back to the board with some definitive ideas or at least things that you're chasing as causals?
Well, we've already made changes. We've already made adjustments. So, for example, when students take the Smarter Balance, now grade 6, you brought up grade 6, they took it in 5th grade, and there are a specific number of points that the state expects a student to be able to increase from one year to the next. So when we sit down with teachers and they're like, but the kids had a great year. You're looking at their report cards, they're successful. So what is it that then prevents them from demonstrating that mastery on an assessment like this? And so we have looked at our benchmarks, we've revised, we've really pulled apart the standards because this assessment is measuring student learning of the very specific standards. Unfortunately, the results we get are very vague. When we look at a student's results and it talks about concepts and procedures, it's either they're approaching, they're not approaching, or they have met. We used to receive lots of information. For example, fractions, probability, all the concepts were there and we would be able to target immediately. It's not like that anymore. It's everything from that whole school year that had to be taught. So we are refining every single unit and making sure that our assessments are rigorous, that students do have to write quite a bit to explain their thinking, to demonstrate comprehension. So all of that is being implemented already. And so that those meetings will be happening with teachers throughout the year, but there were meetings with whole group of departments once these results came out. I mean, they weren't even out 24 hours, and those teachers were in our offices because we just had to brainstorm and find out what possibly was going on.
So I'm a little unclear. So you're saying the work is still ongoing?
Well, we've already implemented changes,
Right.
but now we're monitoring. We're monitoring to ensure, can we identify what students don't have their heads wrapped around a particular, content or particular skill that's being taught, and how are we intervening, right away? And we're going to be using the internal Smarter Balanced online assessments that we give that will hopefully give us additional information. There shouldn't be surprises. We should have a clear indication of whether students are ready and that they feel comfortable demonstrating their knowledge. And so we're building that. We're building that with our staff.
Anyone else?
Oh, thank you.
I do have a second part,
Please.
the AP results. So what you have in front of you, on the front side, has all of the courses that students have taken, and what's in orange are how students did this past year, 2017. So you'll see studio art, two-dimensional design, 7 students, 100% of the students met levels 3, 4, or 5 for their score. And then you look at drawing portfolio, there were 2 students, and both of those students also received either a 3, 4, or 5. Biology, 14 students, 71% of the students received a 3, 4, or 5. Chemistry, we had 1 student taking it on VHS and being supported at school, and that student achieved a 3, 4, or 5. Comparative government and politics, also through VHS, 1 student, and that student was also successful, achieving a 3, 4, or 5. Calculus, we had 10 students, and 9 of them received a 3, 4, or a 5. English language and composition, we had 2 students through VHS, and both received a 3, 4, or 5. English lit and comp, 10 students, and here again 9 of them received a 3, 4, or 5. European history, there were 6 students, and 3 of them received a 3, 4, or 5. French language and culture, 1 student, and that student did receive a 3, 4, or 5. Human geography, that was taken through VHS. There were 2 students, and 1 did receive a 3, 4, or 5. We also had a student, the same student, take macroeconomics and microeconomics through VHS and successfully received a 3, 4, or 5. In physics, 3 students were in the course, and 2 received a 3, 4, or 5. In psychology, you see 23 students, and 9% received a 3, 4, or 5. In Spanish language and culture, 19 students, 58% received a 3, 4, or 5. So when you look at individual courses, for the most part, there are some fantastic results here. We were really pleased with, calculus and English lit and comp. You may recall that we do allow students to try an AP course, and there is an entry-level course that we have shown here, and those particular students are not doing as well on the particular exam for that particular course. So we have also made adjustments in that particular course by having the instructional leader of the department also teaching, and making some internal adjustments to assist the students and really help them with released AP items and having them take those during school so that they can hopefully be more successful for that particular course. But overall, we thought the students did very well on some tough courses. In the back, just for your information, if you flip it over, some accolades here. Just that you would know, 67% of the 2017 class of seniors took an AP course. Normally that might be around a third of the class. It's a high percentage. And 11 seniors were AP scholars, meaning that they scored a 3 or greater on a minimum of 3 AP exams. 4 seniors received AP Scholar with honor recognition for scoring a 3 or better on a minimum of 4 exams. And 3 students received AP Scholar with distinction recognition for scoring 3 or better on a minimum of 5 AP exams. And then I provided for you the total number of students who took at least 1 AP exam in the past 3 years. We did have a smaller senior class last year. There were only 49 students compared to the 79 students that was in the senior class in 2016. So our numbers changed quite a bit, and I just wanted to share that additional information with you.
Alan, did you have a question?
No, I just want to say this looks great, and I'm really happy to see, you know, one of my concerns very often was the open testing and the open admissions, which looks like it's going very well.
Well,
It's
it is
very
open
equitable.
admissions. You know, if the students have met all the prerequisites,
Yeah.
you know, they can't just skip over courses.
Right, right.
But they are required to take the AP exam. If
right.
they're in the course,
Right, and that seems to be working out well, after all. You know, and what's also interesting is that, you know, VHS is relatively new and scary to some parents, and to even non-parents who just in the region might not be familiar with it or trust it because of its modern cyber technique. And clearly that's holding its own, because there are the students who are enrolled in the VHS classes are doing well.
yes,
because-
I
and-
think
and
they
there's not
really
a lot of wiggle
selected
room.
something that they really wanted to study.
Right,
right?
but there's also not a lot of wiggle room. You have one student in there. If that one
Yes.
student doesn't score a 3 or above, you get a 0%, and it throws
Yes,
everything off.
that's
So it's
true.
really, really
That's
good to
true.
see. That's very nice to see. And then my only question is, what's going on in psychology?
I just explained that for students who want to try a college level course, that is the particular course,
That's
and
the
we
one.
don't turn students away. So we are trying to address that gap.
Because there really is no track for that in
No, as long as they've taken, you know, their other humanities level courses, you're right, there isn't. It's not like they needed to take something else.
to ensure that they have, there's no
Right, we don't
progression.
offer regular psychology. We
But
don't
even
talk
to
with
assure
general.
that there's some kind of, you know, aptitude to that before they launch, so, you know.
There
you know,
isn't, you're right. There isn't this minimum SAT level or anything like that.
anything that correlates in a high school curriculum, yeah.
Right, right. That might exist in other school districts. I mean, that
Well,
certainly
maybe.
could exist where there are some pretty harsh, tough prerequisites.
Or even if you had a, you know, a freshman elective intro to psychology or something, then you could tell whether people would have an aptitude or an interest that would then end up in AP psychology later on. But without that, it's really hit or miss, I guess, is what you're saying. Okay.
Greg?
If we offered AP statistics, this would be the first thing they would be studying, along with the psychology, the AP psychology students, so. Am I correct that we're offering 18 AP courses, is that correct? Or do we offer even more, we just don't have students taking them?
Well, here you do have all the courses that we would normally offer, other than AP Physics, which we do offer, but we had a large percentage of kids take it 2 years ago, so they weren't taking it last year. So
Right.
that's not represented here, but for the most part, the courses we offer are definitely represented.
And are there other AP courses that people could take by use of the virtual high school?
Oh, yes, lots.
So, you know, it might be very helpful for people in the community to know that at Chappaq, you could take, I don't know, I'm just pulling a number out of the air, 30 AP courses. Because a lot of students look at schools and they measure them according to how many AP courses they offer. And, you know, you have schools in DERGs A and B offering upwards of 48 AP courses.
Correct.
And so the question is, if we afford the opportunity to take that many courses, we need to tell people that. So
Right.
they look at us differently than if they say, oh, that's a school where you can get 10 courses.
Right. I know that the counselors meet with families and have a personalized meeting to ensure that the interests that students have are matched and mapped on a pathway for them. And I know that they do share what is available through VHS. I know that we've highlighted one particular course this evening, just so that you're aware, if that one particular course was not included here, the overall percentage of students that received a level 3, 4, or 5 would jump 15 percentage points. But our denominator and numerator, adjusting for what we have here, significantly decreased that.
So it was actually it's a question that I had in a recent article that some may have seen. I think it was in Litchfield County Times, talked about AP results.
Yes, Spectrum.
Was it Spectrum? Thank you. And I believe the article said that the state average for was 72%, give or take.
We would have surpassed that. I just brought that up. If
So
the one
So
course.
the psychology one was the one that was pulling it down,
Correct.
obviously, by the numbers. Is that a particularly tough course? Like, if you look at what the state average for passing that course is, just that course, it can't be 9%, so,
I have
but
to express,
what is it?
I have to express to you, these are college level courses, right? So we do have students with the aptitude and the grit and the self-directedness to do well in VHS, to do well in calculus, and whatever they decide to take an AP. But we don't close doors for students. So when we're trying to offer opportunities, that is the particular course, and it takes a significant amount of discipline and time to achieve what you are requiring. So, yeah.
I don't disagree, but go ahead.
If you meet with Alan Bernstein, who is our college board advisor in the Northeast, he will tell you that College Board is looking for about a 60% rate of kids getting a 3, 4, and 5. Because when you are higher than that, what you're doing is you're not allowing a lot of kids to take the AP. So what happens in some of those Gold Coast towns, for example, they're going to keep those doors and those gates closed to kids who are not going to get the 3, 4, and 5, so that they remain very high when it comes to all of those rankings. So, you know, it's a very interesting political game that some school systems play. And he would be an excellent person to come and have at a retreat or just at a meeting to hear, because he does give a lot of great insight to about the College Board and the importance of taking the AP exams, even if you don't get the one or the even if you only get 1 or 2.
Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that, because philosophically, they also want to offer opportunities for all kids, not just kids that are the highest achieving.
I think that would be of interest to
Okay.
hear, to hear from that individual.
Education meeting. He would love to come.
Yeah. Just my question again back was really psychology. I mean, the state average, I mean, I know the course it looks difficult on paper, you know, just based on the percentages, but this must be underperforming based on the rest of the state, I would imagine.
9%, yes.
Yeah. So like when you take a course like that, I mean, we don't have to get into the particulars here, but if you look at that and say, okay, what do we need to do on that course? So we're not going to test or filter our students in, because that's what I think I'm hearing.
Right.
Right? That so far we're doing well in that regard. We don't need to do that. Okay, fine. So if we keep letting students take the psychology course, I mean, what lessons learned are we going to pull back to say,
So there's,
this may not end well for any of them or us?
right.
They'll
So
be disappointed, et cetera.
there is intensity right now where the students are practicing significant amounts of time actually taking an AP-like psychology exam based on the released items. So we're assessing whether to continue to offer this course. We are also having that dialogue, just so that you're aware. But right now, we do have it this school year, and we're implementing some intense changes to offer as many experiences as possible that mirror the real AP exam experience.
Okay. Jim?
Did I understand you to say that the psychology course attracts students who might not otherwise, if it might be their first bite at an AP course?
Correct. That is absolutely correct. Yes.
So it's a general introduction for many students who aren't as driven.
When you
perhaps.
look at the list of AP courses,
So I think it
this is
should
the
be
course.
continue to be, something like that has to be continue to be made available, so the students take the first bite.
So we're attempting with internal changes to hopefully have more success. But I did want you to know that we've had discussion of whether to take it off of the offerings as well.
if I may.
Jim?
If that's the if there's, even if they're underperforming students, and they could drag down our averages, if we're getting students to buy into that course, I wouldn't terminate it. I wouldn't terminate it without having something to replace it, something that the students would be attracted to. The general students, Greg. Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. Greg?
Well, in a brief research that I was able to find out, I believe the percentage of students getting 3, 4, and 5 on AP Psych in 2017 nationwide, 64.1%.
Yeah, we knew we were below.
Yeah. But it's important to do what you did here.
Of course,
And to, you know,
of course.
to peel it back and to understand, because if you look at something like AP Calc,
Yes.
I mean, that's a great stat.
Yes. And those kids put in a tremendous amount of time. They were here, I want to say it was like a Saturday. I mean, really spending a lot of time, and that's what's required.
Right. So, you know, so when you look at something like the psychology one, I do think it warrants more thought, and we shouldn't be, and I don't disagree with Jim, is that we should be offering children opportunity
Right.
to opportunity for whatever motivates them, and not particularly cut off courses or close doors, trying to protect an average. You know,
Well, then-
certainly not advocating that. On the other side, it may be a lure that, oh, psychology sounds like good first place to dip my toe in the water, and it turns out to not perhaps be a good place to
Right.
dip the toe in the water because you're just looking at headlines, right? Calculus has a scary sound to anybody. Psychology may be more, come on in. It's not that bad.
Not as threatening.
Right. So I would suggest or ask that we think about this more. Maybe there's a more appropriate course as a first come, first, you know, as a
Yes.
first
Entry.
go around.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Greg?
I was just going to say that the other thing you have to remember about psychology is it's probably the largest department by size in terms of number of students in most liberal arts institutions. It's a very popular major, and you're going to find more psychology majors than almost anything else in most undergraduate liberal arts colleges. So it's not surprising there would be a lot of interest in it. I think we should absolutely keep it going. I think this, somehow there seems to be, and this is some kind of an aberration here, and I think we should keep going with it, and we should keep encouraging students to take this. I think these results are fantastic in two respects. Number one, obviously the kids did very well. But number two, there's a broad offering of AP courses at this school, far broader than I ever imagined there would be or could be for a school this small. Don't stop. Keep it up. That's fantastic.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Greg? Ag STEM is next on the list. I don't know if Bob wanted to do it.
Well, I was just going to say, I'm
first.
going to start the Ag STEM presentation by turning it over to Bob.
Yep.
In your packet tonight is an update from the last time you saw the report. There's really only 3 changes. It's on page 2. We made payments for the land survey, the wetland report, and right now we have pending approval on 2 items that are on tomorrow night's building committee, totaling $35,113. And the overall change in payments is $41,763 more than it was last time. And that's a short version of it.
Second page. Yes.
Second page, I'm sorry, it's on the second page.
Oh, but it's on your
It's on,
on the computer, yeah.
sorry.
And it's the one that's called E. What is it? E3. I already opened it up. E2. Document E2.
And those are the payments that are pending at this point for $35,113. $113.
So Bob, just to be clear, year-to-date,
We've made,
total amount spent or
include,
obligated or incurred is $1,007,996.30. Is that correct?
no, that's the balance of the remaining. What we actually incurred was 748,000, the number next to it.
Of the 740, okay.
The 748 is what actually was paid out
Oh.
and is pending. The
Got it.
remaining is over to your extreme right.
Okay,
Okay?
got it, thank you.
Of that 700,000, about a third of it was paid out for pre-referendum, right?
Oh, yeah. That's all.
I was just going to call to your attention that of the $748,000, approximately a third of it was paid out as pre-referendum expenses.
247 on
Right.
the very top number on the very first page.
So once the referendum was approved, it's about $500,000 that's been spent pursuing the program. Just so we're comparing apples to apples.
Is there any questions, Jim?
Are they asking for the approval of an expenditure tonight? Nope. Or,
Nope.
no? Okay.
It's sitting in front of the building committee.
Okay.
There you go.
No questions? Thank you, Bob.
I'm going to go up to the microphone, so I think it'll be easier to be able to point. As you know, we brought in a consultant to basically take over the role that had previously been filled by Bill Davenport in advising the AgSTEM program, advising our faculty of the curricular issues and how they impacted space. When you decide how you're going to teach a course, it tells you what equipment you need to teach that course, how much space you need for the number of students who will be taking the course to be in the classroom and functioning at any given time, and how much space you need around the equipment so that it can be offered safely. And so this process was done by the two consultants we have, one of whom was a person with a background, educational background in this area, who taught these programs and who worked on a major school construction project in Massachusetts, and the other was an architect who worked in these same areas and doing these AgSTEM programs. And they were very helpful. And Jennifer, I don't know if you want to add something to that, because you've been working very closely with them. I haven't.
The one thing I would say is that their participation in this process was not only to look at the spaces, but the first step that they took was identifying all the educational frameworks nationally, and in Connecticut, what's currently I guess, the educational goals and what should be taught in agricultural programs. So they compiled all of this research together as a starting point. What are the educational goals and frameworks? And then they, from there, figured out, well, what do we need in those spaces? What spaces do we need? What equipment, space around the equipment? But they had to figure out what the frameworks were to work from to start off with.
Yeah, and I think that's very important, because the task that we gave them was to think of this not as the 20th vocational agricultural program in Connecticut, but the first 21st century AgSTEM program. And so it was important to look at how these things are being taught, where Connecticut's going, so that we would be right there with where it had to be. And of course, what's happened is it's impacted the building. Let me give you the short story. The short story is the building is going to have to get bigger. The total program is going to have to get bigger. As a result of this, they discovered that in many cases, the space that they had originally allocated was inadequate to the program. And in fact, the space that they are proposing, which is about an addition of 2,000 square feet, to the program, is barely adequate to contain the lowered enrollment figures that we've given them for what might be there. There will be equipment that we will not be able to put in certain things. For example, our wood shop will not have a bandsaw. Simply no way to fit it. We don't have enough wall space. You need wall space for these tools, and you just don't have it. So what they've done, though, is they have been able to come up with an amount of space with a modestly small increase in square footage that will give us a full program. So we're not shorting the students on what they need to have. We'll have alternatives for equipment we don't have, so that they'll be able to actually do what the program requires them to do. But let me just take you through where these spaces are, and I'd like to refer to the big map, the big plan, so it's easier for me to point. Oh, you have a pointer. Okay. I don't know if it's on. Okay, here we go. There we go. All right. If you think of the building, this area up here I'm going to refer to as the North Ag STEM addition. This is the North Ag STEM renovation. This is the South Ag STEM addition, the greenhouse, head house, and this is the South Ag STEM renovation. This is the equine building. I'll start with the equine building because it's easy. The red lines in all cases are what was originally proposed, and as you can see, in some places we've gone out. The equine facility is easy because we traded space down here, which we removed, and stuck it up here. And over here we added about 210 square feet, or 205, 210, I can't remember exactly how much. 210 square feet right here was added. So that's what happened with the equine facility in here. And we can go drill down into the details of what's going on in the buildings in a second. Up here at the North Ag STEM addition, this is the largest increase. There is approximately 1,305 gross square feet added to this building. Some of it came off over here and was put over here. In the the North Ag STEM alteration, we added 510 square feet, which basically what we did is this area over here is an area where we have a graphics lab, and what we've done is we've invaded this space. It's much too large for what's being done here, and in the future we'll probably divide this into 2 classrooms. It doesn't make this space unusable for classrooms, but it invades it just a little bit in order to expand the amount of space that was available for the facilities here, which we'll go into in a second. At the South addition and the South renovation, there are no changes. There's no increase or decrease. That's the same as it was before. So the primary issue is up here, which is where all of the, I want to say, things like the metal, the welding area, the wood shop, the small engine shop. It's where all the shops are and the related facilities for those. And the other advantage of having that all in one location and not spreading it out of the addition, because we asked the question, why wouldn't you want to spread some of this stuff to building space that's not being used as much? And the answer is, number one, the ceiling heights of the building are inadequate for this. This all has higher ceiling heights. And the second reason is you're going to have one teacher supervising this area. And as a result, you want it all within line of sight and accessibility. So, for a variety of reasons, the addition made the most sense. And if you have something to add to that, I'd love to have you do it. No, that's on.
Adjacencies for the shop area was another reason to put that all in the addition. Breaking it apart didn't necessarily make sense, not only for one teacher to oversee the areas, but you might be working on a project in the wood shop. You might need to have access to the metal shop. It would be a good idea to have adjacencies.
Do we have a second slide showing the individual? Yeah.
Sure. And you do have a packet, colored pictures, the same as these slides, so you can possibly read them if you want to read along. This is a blow-up of the North Addition, and the program areas up at the top: a small engine shop, wood shop, welding area. Storage that's now adequate, clearances around equipment that's now adequate, There is one minor correction. We are planning for a band saw, but it was a radial arm saw, for instance, if anybody's into. Oh, I'm sorry. That's okay, but some people might say, oh, how could you do it without a band saw? But that is included. There's a radial arm saw that is one thing that a permanent, it wouldn't be a permanent fixture in the room, but we did have a portable version. I have asked the consultants, what would it take to provide, is there additional square footage required if we need to provide the radial arm saw or other equipment in the welding room? But right now they feel it is adequate to get this project up off the ground. But it certainly, when they came on board, they were told that we had to be very careful about square footage and what the state was expecting to see out of this project in caps that they had put onto it. The north alterations still have a lot of the same spaces that were there originally. And when Greg and I are talking original, and when you're looking at the footprints there, the red outline, and as we're comparing additional square footage, it's really from a benchmark of May of earlier this year when we had a schematic design done and a schematic design estimate. So these changes have occurred since May, since that benchmark. Small animal spaces, there's some rooms here that the consultants told us we needed that we didn't originally plan for. They might not necessarily be that large, but thus the increase in needing to break out 500 square feet into adjacent existing area, such as a quarantine room for small animal area, a washroom that was larger that would be used by 2 small animal rooms, because not all the small animals, rabbits, reptiles, they wouldn't be in the same space together, that we actually needed to have 2 spaces to address the animals that were planned for the program. And there's also a flexible AgSTEM computer lab and multipurpose classroom, so those can be used by all the AgSTEM programs as classroom space, computer space, some CAD drafting for AgSTEM. Landscape design, for instance, could be done in that space. Our food science program is also in the alterations, and a veterinary science STEM lab. Did you want to add anything to the? No. Okay. The south area, the large space in orange is really not what we're discussing an update on right now. It's still as it was in May. That's the science labs for general middle school, high school. That's not AgSTEM. That's a large portion of the plan that you see for reference. But this green area that we're taking over in the existing building, that hasn't changed since May, that would have plant science, biotech lab, a sales and potting area, and that would be attached to the greenhouses at the south, or the greenhouse, and head house addition at the south. And we plan to have some growing areas at the south, right outside the greenhouse area. And as for the animal demonstration building, it was really just a little bit too tight in one of the animal areas in order to fit what we needed. And also, it's not just about, in all cases, the equipment, but we need to have 16 kids potentially in each one of these spaces, being able to demonstrate something to them, being able to have 16 of them, stand around in an area, and space needed to be sufficient so that kids can actually be in a group in these classrooms. It might not just be, a kid or 2 in the space. So just that small additional square footage there in the animal area is what was needed, our consultants felt. So all in all, additional, additional square footage of new construction was, I think about, sorry, I had to write it down. Just about 1,500 square feet, 1515. gross square feet, and then renovation space increased 510 square feet as of today. Well, that's what we're planning on, but we'd like, I guess, approval that these changes that we're recommending, that we should go forth with our design development package with those changes recommended by our consultant.
Just in case.
Yeah.
I want to point out a couple things on the plan to avoid confusion. You will see space reflected as both gross square footage and net square footage. The reason for net is because when the State Department of Education reviews programs, when we have EdSpec standards, those are phrased in net square footage. Why? Because it matters how much space is in the classroom inside the building. What is it net of? It's net of the wall, the exterior walls, the space between the interior surface of the wall and the exterior of the building. So gross includes the exterior of the building. So programs are concerned about how much space is available within the room to hold it, but construction is concerned with what contains that space, and hence, from a construction standpoint, we're looking at gross square footage. And that's why we've put both on here, so there would be not so much more confusion, but less confusion, because if you were looking at an ed spec, you'd be looking at net square footage. If you were looking at the cost of the building or the program, we'd be looking at gross square footage. And that's why they're both expressed on the diagram, and I hope I made that clear. The other thing is, I know you're going to be interested in costs. That's the one area we're not at that point yet, because this is very, very preliminary stuff. I will tell you that, in general, more square footage equals more cost. So we do know that costs will go up. We've been keeping numbers, which I'm told are very preliminary numbers. Those numbers had indicated that the science lab program was a bit over the original budget, and the Ag STEM program was under the original budget. This is probably going to eat up that under area, and the total project may be over, but by the time you factor in generous contingencies for cost overruns and other expenses and for environmental concerns, we may be totally under budget, or we may be over budget. We don't know, so there's not much I can tell you about that now, but we'll know more when the design development phase of the project is completed. Now, currently, these changes caused Castle Booz to have to go back and make some modifications to the schematic drawings, and then they will finish design development. We expect that to be finished in November. And if they're able to keep to that schedule, then we should finish our construction drawings in time to get us to able to put the project out to bid, assuming it's funded, to put the project out to bid in the spring, which has been the goal, because putting it out to bid in the spring is the way we get to delivery of a building in time to open the program in the fall of 2019. And I can tell you that we do not have a lot more time to waste in this process. And one of the reasons why we have been continuing to fund certain aspects of this and to fund certain obtaining of information is to hold that delivery date, because construction costs increase with delay. I think I've been told by our construction manager that they were looking at something akin to, if we were to delay the program by a year, for example, they're looking at an increase of 3 to 4% in construction costs for the materials and the construction work. I don't have a total figure of how much that is, but I can tell you that's what they were looking at as a factor, and that was before we had hurricanes strike Houston, Florida, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands, the U.S. Virgin Islands. That's causing a tremendous a tremendous increase in the demand for materials to make the hundreds of billions of dollars worth of repairs that are going to have to occur down there. In addition, it could cause labor issues. So they're saying that they're trying to keep in mind that a year's delay could be a 5 to 6% increase in costs. And so we're really trying to avoid delays at all costs, and that's why we keep moving forward. with the program, because you've asked us to move forward with the program. We're trying to keep our options open, but we're trying not to spend money if we don't have to. So we're trying to spend only as much as we have to, and that's the process. So I don't know if you have any questions, but that's the presentation. The building committee is proposing that we move forward on this construction plan, that Castle Booze complete their schematics and the design development process, so we're ready to bid when the time comes.
Yeah, my only question is, I mean, obviously this is great to have more precise ed specs that would require at this time adjustments to the physical space as opposed to figuring this out a long time from now. But my only question is, knowing how at this time, or beginning about this time last year and following for a couple of months, and probably proceeding into the winter, there was an awful lot of resculpting of the plan based on the Department of Administrative Services requirements, and how there were several junctures at which we had to keep resculpting the building. So a certain square footage, gross or net, but total square footage was arrived at in order to satisfy their requirements, so we could pass through their gauntlet, so to speak. How does adding an additional I'm not quite sure how they count it, whether it's an additional 2,025 square feet or whether it's an additional 1,500 square feet, because the 500 is just renovations. Thank you for clarifying the difference. But how does that increase in space? Was there leeway with DAS? Is this going to make us have to go back and get reapproval for them? How does this fit in with what their stipulations are as far as our reimbursement?
Well, it's interesting that the priority list that we're on actually has us at 66,000 square feet that we're nowhere near at this point. There were certainly discussions after the priority list was already sent to the governor. We're still on the list for that 66,000 square feet. And we're nowhere close to that. The discussions that we had last with Costa had us within about 2,000 square feet of where we are today. We have not had those discussions with Costa again to say, hey, we've increased about 2,000 square feet, but we're way under the priority list amount. Our hunch is that we can very well explain why we're over, not what's on the priority list, but what was communicated to him earlier this year. Things like safety of students, having new frameworks come out, educational frameworks even in Connecticut have come out since then, so that we can explain our needs for that couple thousand square feet that won't put us anywhere close to what the priority list has. And I think that the state's probably ultimately concerned about the cost, and what we're trying to do is figure out, when we get to this next level of design and we can crunch the numbers and get better numbers, are we still within the price tag on the priority list, or do we have to figure something else out? We really, with the consultants, we looked hard at, we don't want to grow this thing, obviously, because usually growing means money too. I wasn't so concerned about square footage numbers per se. It was more of the cost. But it's like, where do we scale back? We just didn't feel that we could meet the educational goals with the smaller spaces, or with certain small spaces missing. And ultimately, that's why I ended up that we're presenting and recommending 1,500 square feet more. Go ahead.
One of the options that we looked at is that our architects presented to us is trimming back on the garage space here. That's that's attached to the equine. Can you put that slide up? Equipment garage. We've got a hay and shavings facility right here, but we could pare back the equipment garage to one bay, and it would save a couple of $100,000 in the course of it. But then you'd have equipment that you'd be storing outside, which we don't view on the building committee as an attractive option. Number one, it limits the life of the equipment. If you're putting your transportation bus, your tractor outside. It's going to limit their lives. Of course, the state does pay for replacements, but that's not the point. You'd be unnecessarily limiting their lives. And you've got stuff standing around on the school property, which we're trying to avoid at all costs. We want to keep a good-looking campus. But that's something that we may have to make those kind of hard decisions if cost becomes an issue down the line. But it's far too early to have that discussion. We need to let them get to the next phase where they can crunch down to some really good numbers.
Greg, before I need to just call a technical timeout here. We need to swap the DVDs. Okay, and we're back.
Next
Michelle, did
question.
you have a question for Greg? Your hand was up before. Thank you.
Is the board going to need to approve the increase in square footage for the moving forward, or is this just to talk about for conversation, to inform us?
We'd like the board to say that they approve of the amended plan, because I think we brought you the first plan and said, do you approve this plan? So we're asking you to approve the amended plan. Obviously, there's going to be another whack at this thing when it comes down to cost. We're going to have to look at it because you have not authorized the expenditure of the full amount of the $29 million and change dollars at the referendum for the AgSTEM program. So you'll have another opportunity to decide if we come in with a cost parameter that's out of whack or you're not happy with, you'll have another opportunity to do that. But we just want to make sure we're on solid ground and we're not off in the hinterlands with the enlargement of this building for the purpose of containing the program we're trying to design. I'm sorry, Michelle.
Well, so in that vein, I would say that I absolutely approve the increase of square footage, especially for all of the areas where we need it to offer program. And then, but I think you're right, that what the state really cares about, or at least DAS, is that bottom line, is the cost. And it seems to me that there could be one or two places that are identified as places, the first places we'd look to not build if we're having cost issues. For example, the garage, the equipment garage, it seems like something that we could maybe add. It doesn't affect program, it affects the equipment and what the campus looks like, and I appreciate that, but it might be something that we could build a couple years down the road in with the state grant, because they have continuing ag grants. Or whatever. I'm not here to identify where, but as long as the program, as long as we can move forward with the program and build the things that need to be built, things that are cheaper to do now versus add on in 2 years.
Well, one of the issues with garages on site, I'm watching Mr. O'Leary over there clutching his chest, is that he's got equipment that is currently stored. Could you go back to the large? It is currently stored here. And that equipment is designed to distribute salt, sand, whatever he uses for de-icing in the winter. You can't store that outside. You're going to end up with a frozen piece of equipment that isn't going to be available, and as a result, when the buses show up 2 hours late, they're going to find an icy place. And so for a variety of reasons, we have to be careful about, it's easy to eliminate those garages because they don't seem important to the educational mission, but they may just be important to whether or not anyone actually can get here in the winter. So that's one of the things we're looking at, and we're trying very hard not to make short-sighted decisions, although we may have to make tough decisions, and we may have to have alternatives. Jim. We have to look at the chart.
Approximately.
Bob should know that. That can't be, yeah, it's about right.
No, that's the budget. That's
about
called
right.
out in the schedule.
Is that for construction? We actually want to go into design development and complete that portion. So I think that we could do design development and then get our cost estimate and then approve the next step. Sorry.
Use your microphone, Bob.
We're still in the design development portion of this thing. That started out as $320,000 for all of that work up to that point before we hit construction documents, which are going to cost $760,000.
Bob, how far are we through design development? Because that's the critical number.
Design development, we still have a balance left of 40% or about $128,000.
So it's about 128 to get to the point where we have some idea of what, a better idea of what this costs.
Right, and that would be from KB&A, and then there's, after they develop the cost itself, that's from O&G, and we only owe 51.8 on that.
All right, thank you.
I've got a question. The classrooms, what number is that? It's the graphics lab and the one above it. Yeah, those two classrooms.
Right. This
I know they're being encroached a little, but are they impairing any of the courses taught or programs taught in those two rooms?
No, actually, there's really only one program. It's in the entire space. It's more space than it needs. And what would be left after this encroachment are two classrooms of 925 and 970 square feet, which are pretty generous sized classrooms. So we believe that this will not negatively impact having those facilities there. And we've got other facilities that have to be relocated. For example, robotics, which is back there behind that wall that says fiction and it's got the big banner on it. That's got to go somewhere else because that's going to be a science lab. So we've got other things that will have to be relocated. We may be doubling up on more of the classrooms than we currently are doubling up on, with more than one teacher in a room during the course of a day. In other words, people don't have their own rooms now, but the fewer of them may have them after this, because we're going to make more efficient use of this building. And that was what DAS was a big factor for them, was to force us to make more efficient use of the building. There's a lot of space in this building that we can't use. We can't exactly put classes out in the mall to the extent to which we have classroom space, but we can make more efficient use of the space we do have.
Is there a risk that when we go, at some point in the process, right, we're going to have to go back to DAS, obviously, what the designs and costs is going to comment one way or another. He has to, right, because he's got to green light us to go into the next phase. And his restrictions as well was more cost-focused than square foot-focused, I remember. Obviously, one drives the other, but in the end, it's dollars. So is there a risk that he looks at the increased amount and says, I drew the line here, anything beyond that is 100% on the district, not subject to reimbursement? Do we know that?
Well, I don't think we know what they're likely to say. My guess is they're not going to want to go over the $29 million they've authorized for AGS, $29.9 million they've authorized for Ag STEM. So I think if we come in with a number and we say, hey, we got one little issue here, you know, we don't need 29, we need 31, I think you're not going to get a good reception as to that extra space. I don't know whether it'll be reimbursed at our regular rate or at the Ag STEM rate, or it won't be reimbursed at all. We don't know the answer to that question. But what we're focused on is, he's focused on cost. I think if we came in there and said, look, we've got good news and bad news. The good news is we've gotten the square footage in half. The bad news is the cost has tripled. That's not going to fly. I mean, I think when you go in there and you say that the cost is still in line and we're still at or under the number, then I think the problem is really, it should not be a problem. At least that's our take on it. And if we need a few more square feet to get it done, so we don't have people, you know, we don't have students hitting each other in the head with 16-foot boards in a wood shop because there's not enough room to move, then I think we'll probably, we'll probably meet a good reception there. We're going to make that argument that in order to implement the changed program, we need this much more space. And that's the way it is.
How did he leave off with us in terms of our obligation to keep him updated? Did he say just come back at the next normal checkpoint, or if anything should change, give me a call? What do we think?
In fact, we did have a check-in with his office. He briefly stopped by. There are other plan reviewers there that we spoke with. I'm trying to think of the date, if it was right in the beginning of July. I don't, it was
During the summer.
It was during the summer. It was after the May timeframe because they wanted to do a schematic design review. So they actually did have our schematic design set, and they looked at the drawings. They said, are things still in line? And at the time, they certainly were. There's a design development review. So after we do the design development set of drawings, and we get a cost estimate for that from O&G, we see if we're in line, are we over somewhere, whatever the case might be. That also has to go to them for a checkpoint. That's just their normal procedure for any project.
Right.
So we will be seeing them after design development to update them and say this is where we're at. I think that if we came in with a cost estimate that said we were over that priority list number, I think that would be a problem.
I think you're right.
I don't think there's any, I don't know that we could sell them on anything to make them increase that amount. I think we could sell them on increasing square footage so long that we can keep in the cost that they expect.
And just to be clear, I'm sure this is like the third time I've asked this question, but the shops themselves, when you think about, you know, the emphasis we're trying to put on the program being unique and the first and STEM, and here we are talking about expanding a wood shop or welding area. These are programmatic requirements from the state, are they not? That we have these pieces in our program? Maybe the question is better asked to Dr. Pat or Kim.
They're in the frameworks.
One of you two.
Minimal skills that work towards those engineering, bigger skills that need to be taught in the frameworks. And that includes welding and wood and
Right.
all that stuff.
Thank you.
One thing that we discussed going forward with that garage, because the garage isn't directly educational program area, we did discuss one option might be moving forward that becomes an alternate. And we could do that. We could have O&G even price that out as an alternate with the design development set. Say, hey, look at what that would be. And if we get favorable bids in the future down the line, it could always be something on the list that either we take, you know, if we do have favorable bids, or it goes away and maybe does get done later as a part of another project or what have you. But we should be able to get a price for things like that. I mean, that's the only area that we could really consider, we thought, that wouldn't affect educational program.
Right.
You know, this is part of the inevitable going back and forth. You're going to see changes that come in and out. You're going to see numbers that go up and down, and we really are trying to seize on something that works here. And we may have to look at options, but the thing we're trying to keep sacrosanct is the educational space and the delivery of the program. That is what's most critical. And if we have to postpone and keep our equipment out in the rain for a while, we may have to do that, if that's what it takes. But it's too early and too preliminary to make those cuts, and we're not going to have that conversation until we know until we have a really good set of numbers.
Okay. So the last schedule you showed, Greg, and I think you alluded to it this evening as well, is that our target was to open the doors in the fall of 2019, but yet
Yes.
construction was going to continue through the balance of the year. Can you talk a little bit more about what is still going to be left once the doors open?
Yeah. Can you give me the full picture of the whole program? Oh, I'm sorry. I should be able to do that. Oh, no, I got to learn how to use this. I'm sorry. This is very sophisticated audio-visual equipment that actually belongs to Chippewa. So, you know, unfortunately, this one doesn't know how to use it. She knows how to use it. I don't. One of the things we've talked about is, you know, we've had so many delays. The fact that we're sitting here in mid-October, the state doesn't have a budget, and therefore they can't act on the bonding bill because they don't know how much money they have for interest. And so, you know, we're sitting here at this point, and that has been delaying us. Some of the other needs for surveys and things have delayed us, but now we're ready to rock and roll and move forward on these things. But what our concern is that we are slowly but surely losing the completion of this program 100% by the end of August of 2019. So what we're doing is we're we have a plan to prioritize what needs to be done in the event we can't complete it. If we can go out to bid in the spring, we will have this building will be pretty well complete by the fall of 19, but there'll be a few things that may hang over and need work. So what we've asked Kim to do is to work directly with O&G in order to prioritize what areas are needed for the fall instruction of 2019. And we expect at this point to have the entire north addition and the north renovation all completed by the fall of 2019. We expect the equine facility to be complete by 2019. The areas that may be still being worked on into the fall may be the greenhouse and possibly some of the science classrooms for AgSTEM. Now, bear in mind that we have money in the budget currently for all of the science labs to be relocated temporarily to other spaces within the building during construction. So it may be that 2 of these remain in that status, in that go into a temporary area that may have been vacated by some of the science labs that are now in full operation, and we may be able to relatively inexpensively relocate these facilities right here. In any event, this space is, at least the greenhouse, is probably not going to be figuring big in the fall curriculum for that year. So the fact, if it lags, if anything lags and that lags, we should be okay. Kim, you might want to address some of those if you have anything to add to that. I don't know.
Greg said it very well. Oh, sorry. Very
Just say no.
There you go.
Greg said it really well and efficiently. I don't think I need to add anything else. Our discussions have been around what can you live without so that we can start in the fall of 2019. And that's really important to me.
I mean, at the present time, we're not 100% sure we're not going to have it all complete, but we're trying to make plans for the eventuality that we don't, and what would be prioritized. So we're trying to get ahead of that game.
Thank you. Any other questions for Greg? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank
We need,
Thank you, Jen.
Greg, are you looking for an approval from the board of, and a motion?
Yeah, I'm looking for a motion to approve the amended plans for the construction project, the AgSTEM project buildings.
F3.
What's on there?
Oh, so we,
Move it up now where you can wait.
all right, yep, we'll proceed per the agenda. All right, so moving on then to, thank you, Greg, to action items. The first one is establishing a graduation date for the class of 2018.
Yes, every year, this is a formality. We have scheduled the class of 2018 to graduate on June 16th, 2018, with the board's approval.
Second.
Any questions? Michelle?
I'm just wondering if you can remind me what the state says about number of days a senior must have done, and you know, I'm thinking about snow days and how close or not close we are to that.
Students have to be in school for 180 days. Most of the time, we make that 180 days. If we don't, they are invited to come back after graduation, and that's...
We're allowed to do that?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
So, and the
I'm sure
18th,
they
I don't
take
have
you
it in
up on
front of
that.
me, but that gives us some snow days. Am I right?
Gives us 3.
3, plus we're at 183 days, so we have 6 days.
83 or 2?
What do we have?
Oh, yeah, 3.
Right, we only
Okay.
have 3 PDs, so we have 6 days to work with, so.
Okay.
Knock on wood.
That's close. Or that's enough room.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So the motion on the floor is to establish a graduation date for the class of 2018 being June 16th, 2018. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All those abstain? Motion passes unanimously. To establish the graduation date is June 16th, 2018. Next is a request from the Burnham PTO to use the Burnham School for a fundraising event.
Move that the request be approved.
Have a second? Okay. Any discussion?
Yes, could I just offer the usual friendly amendment that it be pursuant to all of our usual policies about the serving of alcoholic beverages, and that those not be served while there are children on the facility? And they comply with the insurance requirements.
That's accepted, thank you.
Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All those abstain. Motion passes unanimously. Now, back to Greg's Ag STEM. I have a motion to approve the changes as presented. Somebody want to, Michelle?
I'd like to move that we approve the changes to the Ag Sem building as presented by the building committee.
Do I have a second? Thank you. Any questions? Pete?
I guess my question is, how much new money are we approving?
None.
None.
We're not asking for new money because we don't know what the cost implications are. I mean, we could be under budget, we could be over budget. My guess is we're probably heading toward over, but as opposed to under, because that's a decent amount of square footage. But we're not asking for new money. We'll come back at the point at which we ask for authority to go forward, presumably after the state decides to fund the project.
Any further questions? Okay. Well, the motion on the floor is to approve the design of, I'm sorry, John? Thank you. Didn't see you saying.
It seems like we have a catch-22 here, though. I mean, we don't know that DAS is going to approve the expansion of the footprint. We probably know that they're not going to vote. They're not going to approve the to exceed 30 million for the entire project, and we still don't know if the state is even going to appropriate money for the project. So, in essence, we're committing to increasing the footprint, which has got to cost more money eventually, and the burden is going to fall. Granted, 2 years ago we did approve the appropriation of 39 million, but in my mind, to increase the square footage by 2,000 or the work on the 2,000 square feet is going to exceed the 30 million cap that DAS more or less placed on the project. So I don't like I would feel more comfortable approving the expansion if the state, again, if and when the state appropriates the grant money for this project. Thanks.
Greg?
I just wanted to make one technical point that we really need the before we can get DAS to react to changes in square footage, we need to know what the cost is, and we can't know that without the design work, without proceeding in the direction of doing that schematic design. In a perfect world, you're right, we would have state approval of the bonding and funding before we go to the extent of even forming a building committee. Unfortunately, we've been placed in the Hobson's choice position of either making progress on our design or risk losing our place in line and killing the project, or going forward with no expectation of being repaid our reliance expenses, thus killing the project. So either way, it's the road to perdition. But unfortunately, that's the game. That's the rules of the game that the state has created and that we've drawn, and we're at an unfortunate time in the history of the state when we don't seem to have the ability to get consensus behind moving forward on educational prerogatives, when we know the education of our children is the most important thing we do as a government, and it's the future of our state and of our country. But yet, this is where we are, and I think the only thing we could do is is head forward to try to be as careful as we can in this very bad bargain that we've gotten, and I just don't know what else to say. I mean, I agree, John, it's not ideal. It's far from ideal. But it is what the game we are, unfortunately, these are the rules, and you don't always get to pick the rules.
All right, the motion on the floor is to approve the required changes to the Ag Stem building as presented by the Building Committee this evening. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say nay. All those abstained. Motion passes. So approve the required changes as presented by the Building Committee. Jim?
Second.
Second. Good. If no one objects, we'll move into executive session. Thank you.
Okay. Into the